Eamon, two really interesting pieces of evidence came out today in day 6 of the trial of Richard Satchwell for the murder of his wife, Tina. The first involves a large chest freezer, which we heard about in the opening. The state's case is that Richard Satchwell killed his wife, Tina, in March of 2017, hid her body in said freezer in the back garden before moving her into the house, where he buried her basically under the stairwell. But the second piece of evidence that was really interesting was from people who knew the couple at these car boot sales. So start wherever you feel with one or the other.
Yeah, so the first up among the car boot people were a mother and daughter, Julie and Mary Crowley. Now Mary's the mum, and she was talking about, they used to go to car boot sales around that time with her daughter in around the Cork area, and before Christmas in 2016 at DoneDeal car boot sale was when they first encountered Tina Satchwell and Richard Satchwell.
Okay.
They didn't know their names at the time.
Months before he would report her missing, basically.
And I suppose it was just a kind of, they're just saying they're kind of explaining how they knew him, how they got to start talking to him. And it was basically, Julie was into Doc Martens and she was wearing a pair that had a particular design on it. And Tina got out of the car she was in, the stall was set up and their car was there and she was in the passenger seat, and she got out to admire Doc Martens, according to Mary Crowley, and asked her where she bought them and said that she collected Doc Martens as well. And that was their first interaction. And it was the Doc Martens and the mutual interest that her daughter and Tina Satchwell had in this. So the next time then, it jumps then to Easter Monday, 17th of April 2017 at the car boot sale in Killarney. And she described this compared to DoneDeal. It's a very big car boot sale. And again, Richard Satchwell, who she now knows his name is Richard Satchwell, he was there and he was selling Doc Marten boots. And again, mentioned that Julie collects them as well. And he basically, they started the conversation again, and he talked about his wife. And he said they just moved into a house, and she'd gotten a serious respiratory illness, and it was probably something to do with mold or fungus growing in the house, because the house had been unoccupied for 12 years. And the doctor had told her she had come to get medical attention in the nick of time, and it could have been a lot worse. And he says, and at car boot sales, people know each other, and there's sometimes a bit of banter is quite normal. And she said, She made some remark to him about, what's she going to say when she comes back and you're flogging all her stuff. And he said, he told her that she had told me to sell her collection of Doc Martens and her clothes, and that we need to make money to repairs to the house. And she was asked then, like, how many pairs of Doc Martens were there? He says, well, Julie had bought 2. This is the second pair she bought that day. But there were others there. There was more there. And she did say she remembered him saying at one point that he had mentioned that Tina was immunocompromised as well. And then she went again, I think it was nearly a month later again in Blarney on the Maybank holiday. She saw Richard Satchwell again and asked how his wife was. Now, she said she wouldn't have recognised her from the picture that was in the Examiner as a missing person at the time. So just asked him, how's the missus? And he was told the same story again. And there was some cross-examination about that, and I think there was a little confusion over some of her daughter's evidence about whether the house that she heard Richard Satchwell describe was in Ireland or England. So she was saying no, definitely wasn't England. That was under cross-examination. So
basically, he was at these car boot sales 1 month, and then 2 months after she had gone missing, the state say at this point he'd murdered her. And how does that timeline tally to him doing interviews with the press and, that story, I suppose? Yeah,
this is still early days yet, because I think that the media coverage, so to speak, doesn't really kick in until June and July in 2017. So this is kind of April and April and early May when he's at these car boot sales. So he's I suppose trying to explain his wife's absence, because these are people that would have known him through his wife. I suppose there was another gentleman there. We just skip over Julie's evidence for now, but there was another gentleman there called Gerard Carey, and he was a stall holder. And he would sell, as he put it himself, he'd sell a bit of everything, but confectionery, dog food and cat food. And Tina would buy treats from him, and he confirmed that, and that's how he kind of got to know her. He described her as a very outgoing person. She was always in good form. Asked, how did she present, and he said she would dress very well, colourful. And he said the dog was always the main feature. She used to have the dog in a little bag at her side. So presumably he's talking about one of the Chihuahua Ruby that we know that from Richard's statements that she always kind of went with the dog. He says they probably first met at one of the car boot sales in Rathcormac in North Cork, and he would have met Richard Satchwell there as well, and he would sell while Tina would walk around. He says he wouldn't have known him for that long. And then again, he also as well as the Crowleys, he also met them on the 17th of April. Sorry, he met Richard on the 17th of April 2017. And he says, we'd set up our stalls and he was at his, and he said, I asked him, had Tina gone walkabout? And Satchwell told him, no, she's not here today. She's very ill and she's gone to her sister in England. And he didn't talk about the business. And then he mentioned from the doc today, he said she wouldn't be at car sales anymore. And so in cross-examination, he was just asked to clarify that any statements to the guards at the time or closer to the time, what he had said was that Richard Satchwell had said to her she wouldn't be the same again, and he agreed with that the statement was probably more accurate.
And when did he make his statements? Was that detail given?
No, it wasn't. We didn't get to hear when he made his statement to the guards. It was just referred to in court. Which is kind of normal enough. It's standard enough.
That statement was in the original sort of file that was reviewed as such, as we spoke about yesterday.
No, I presume it would have been like it wasn't really two investigations. It was just it was a new senior officer took over, but it was the same investigation all along.
And while he said that to these people at the car boot sales, that she'd some sort of a respiratory illness caused by the damp in the home and things weren't looking good as such for her, he was at that point telling the Gardaí that she had gone missing with money, and essentially they'd been...
Wanted to clear her head, I think was the phrase that he used in some of the interviews with guards, and that, and again, he delayed for the first couple of days going to the guards to report her missing because he felt she wanted that space, and he said that she had told him in the past that if he went to the guards, that, she would call the guards on him. And he was also then in some of the later statements that he made, like in the enhanced interview one that we talked about earlier in the week.
Yeah, he
was more or less he was saying that he suspected that she wanted, or she had told him several times, 200 to 300 times, that she wanted revenge on him having left her at one stage to go to England for a year. But he said in his case it was a bit different. He stayed in contact and he sent money, and he did it because he'd gotten into trouble trying to buy things he couldn't afford for her.
And so the other kind of things he said are that she may have run off with a Polish man.
Yeah, that's we heard that again, earlier in the week, and these were rumors that he was saying he had heard, but he again would say he didn't believe that to be true, although he did say in again one of those interviews that this is I think the last one that he did in 2021, where he more or less said he still personally thought she was alive and that she'd turn up with another fella in tow, or he'd get a registered letter telling him to sell the house.
Mm-hmm. And to the media, because you watched a lot of the videos and the interviews he did with the media, he basically sort of suggested that she had disappeared because she just wanted to be on her own.
Yeah, and he fully expected her to come back, and he kind of repeated a couple of times, like, "In my arms are open, you're not in trouble," and then again, I think down the road, a couple of years after that, he did say in that longer interview with the guards, the voluntary one he did, where he kind of he said, I don't think there could be a relationship now, like if she came back, because it's so long.
Mm-hmm. So he's certainly that evidence that was put before the jury today is something new, he was saying, basically, from what he was saying to the media and the Gardaí. So as regards the car boot sales, was there any evidence of how much money he was making, or the finances around the sale of these collection Doc Marten boots or anything?
No, she did. Well, I think the one pair of boots was bought for €70. So this was Julie, Mary's daughter, who would have encountered them, and when she was trying on the boots, she was listening to the conversation between her mother and Richard Satchwell. So she was there to kind of, to back up her mother's versions, or she was not there to back up her mother's version of events. She was giving her version of events. She was a witness as well. And again, she talked about both times, hearing the story about Tina having the respiratory illness and having, she'd gone to England and that they were selling off her stuff basically to raise money to pay for the alterations to the house that they needed.
So was there any evidence today, like overall in regards to money or their finances? We were kind of getting a little hint. Yeah,
well, I suppose in terms of did he make any money from car boot sales? I mean, that was asked of the forensic accountant from the Economic Crime Unit, who was brought in to help with the investigation after David Kelleher had basically got all the bank and revenue statements and documents and handed them over to him for an analysis. And in cross-examination, he was asked, did you go to a car boot sale by Brendan Grehan? And he said, no, he hadn't. So, I mean, but what he did do is he did a full kind of analysis, which was, he talked about, he was given...
Of what was going in and out.
Yeah,
kind of like
all of that,
recorded as such.
Yeah, and he was given the background information, what this was all about. And he'd been told that Satchwell had said that €25,000 had been taken and it had been accrued saved up over 4 years. And that some of it came from the remainder of the house price of the house they'd sold in Fermoy. And we heard a little bit about this yesterday from, evidence from Detective Kelleher. And that he could make $250 a week from selling bric-a-brac at car boot sales. And he said, having reviewed all of their accounts, they had one bank account in his name. This is coming now from the forensic accountant, Tig Toomey. And they also had two money transfer accounts, one with Western Union and one with MoneyGram. And he said this is the extent of the financial institutions they engaged in. Now, he kind of more or less said, like, some of the expenses were easy to follow, things matched up. And that from September 2015 to April 2017 or thereabouts, they were in constant overdraft on this particular bank account. They had spent more money than they'd brought in. And there was also a large number of transactions through Western Union, and it showed that €17,820 had been paid to him and that 16,000 had been paid out. But then there was other accounts, and when it was all added up, the balance was that he was 8,000 in arrears. So
8,000 in arrears from money that he was transferring out of the country and money that was transferring back into his accounts.
Yeah.
He was down 8,000.
Yeah. And in yesterday's evidence, we heard, from the email thread to the International Monkey Rescue and the kind of the text messages to Mr. James from the same organisation. He'd mentioned that he'd been all over Ireland paying money to you. So this is, I presume, this is, part of the same, I suppose, pattern of financial transactions that he was involved in. And it's trying to, I suppose, it's giving a full picture of their financial situation. So there was also a Littlewoods account.
Right.
Which
that's the clothing, kind of online clothing.
Yeah, it's kind of, well, as they put it, it's for ladies' clothes or household goods, I think it was mentioned in court as well. And it was in Tina's name at one point, and there was a $4,500 maximum credit line on that. And that line of credit was generally at 90% fully used, or was actually exceeding the limit near the end. And there was a significant build-up of arrears because the minimum payments hadn't been met. And so they looked at the revenue and welfare statements. Tina had no employment at this time, and his welfare payments were included, that for a dependent adult as well. So basically he was collecting the dole for both him and her. And in relation, again, we heard some of this yesterday as well, in relation to the sale of the Fermoy house for €120,000. Some of it was used to pay off the fees as well as the house in Youghal. And at the end of the process, that there was just €372 left over. And there was no sign of any windfall of any kind that could account possibly for this.
And no mortgage.
There was no mention of any mortgage, no.
Mm. And was he not working?
He seems to, from we hear from the different statements, that he did work at different stages, working as a truck driver. At this time in March, it looked like he wasn't working. He didn't have a job at that stage.
Right, okay. So their finances don't look too pretty.
No, they were in debt. Yeah,
and living above their means,
and living above their means, and constantly in the red on their main account. That's the way it was described in court, like constant, unauthorized overdraft.
These car boot sales are interesting, aren't they?
Yeah, but he also, don't forget, was obviously was interested in DoneDeal as well. And from his phone, they found that he'd put an ad up.
Oh, this is the freezer.
This is the freezer, and so we heard from a then detective, now a Garda sergeant, Kieran Crowley. He was a detective in Middleton at the time, and one of the tasks he was given in 2017 was to conduct inquiries with DoneDeal over an ad that was linked to his phone. And he put in that request, I think, on August the 9th, 2017, and he got the info the next day. And this is basically, this copy of this ad then was given to the jury. It was read out in court, and it just reads as follows: large chest freezer, free to take away, working perfect, just needs a clean, giving away because I need the space. And that was dated the 27th of March, 2017 at 9:49 a.m.
Just needs a clean. I mean, the same freezer that the state say that Tina's body was kept in for 2 days before he brought her back into the property and buried her there.
Yeah, and the same freezer that he offered his cousin as well, if she was interested in taking.
Okay. Was there ever?
That's all we've heard about the freezer so far. So it's obviously, we'll see what happens. I'm sure
it's a freezer. Just remind us what it was that the state say happened when she was killed.
The state's case that they're going to we're going to hear in evidence. So we've heard a good bit of it now. We've more or less got up to the arrest on the 10th of October 2023 today. And they're saying that she died after he was restraining her with a belt. And he's claiming that she tried to stab him in the head with a chisel on the morning of March the 20th, and that she went limp and died, and that for a time he placed her body in a chest freezer in a shed in the back before removing her from that and burying her in a 3-foot deep grave that was built that was under the stairs in the sitting room.
Okay. And these are, the state's case is essentially admissions he has made.
Well, they're putting this all before the jury.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, he's making a statement, like they're saying that after his arrest, initially he stuck to his story. Mm-hmm. And then as their search went on over the 10th and 11th of October, he was released, but as the search went on, the remains of Tina Satchwell were found in this grave, and that he was rearrested, and then he changed his story and for the first time gave this narrative of a row, or her coming at him with a chisel in her hand trying to stab him in the head with it, him restraining her and she dying.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what did he say, or was that in the opening statement? Has that been put before the jury, what the row was about?
No, there's been nothing. No, and it was just a bare kind of like a very brief synopsis of more or less what the state were going to be putting before the jury. So in terms of what's gone in front of the jury, we've got up now to October the 10th. So Detective Garda David Kelleher has been called back. I think this is his third time in the dock now. So he's a witness who's been called at different stages because of his different involvement at various times in the case. So on the 10th of October 2023, which we heard yesterday, now he is now the officer coordinating the incident room, working with the then Detective Inspector Anne-Marie Toomey. And so it's a very basic kind of description. They attended the address of D.I. Toomey 6 minutes later at 5 o'clock. 6 minutes later, I arrested Mr. Richard Satchwell for the murder on or about the 19th or 20th of March 2017. He explained the reasons to him for his arrest. He made no reply, indicated he understood the reason for his arrest, and he was taken to Cove Garda Station at 17:53 p.m. And then he gives evidence about how he was brought through the process of going into custody, that, you tell like the custody sergeant, like, anything that he needs to be aware of, like mental health history, anything medical. He's given notice of his rights, such as, a right to a solicitor, a doctor, a meal if he's kept overnight. And he's explained to the jury the custody sergeant is independent. You have to satisfy them that the arrest is necessary. So he had this conversation with the custody sergeant that went into great detail. And that, like, he gives evidence at 18:24, the conversation with this custody sergeant, he outlined these reasons why he should be detained. And then he agreed, and at 18:40, his detention was granted. So he was arrested at 5:06, and at 20 to 7, he's now officially in detention in Cove. And then the next part then is there's an interview on video, which they've started playing to the jury. So it's about 2 hours, 47 minutes long. And at this stage, we've heard about 30 minutes of it. So they're going to play some more of that.
Yeah. And as we heard in the opening speech, then this is the original narrative that she's left. The suitcase is gone. The money's gone. He has been up to do a message for her in a different village, has come back, found her missing. Dogs are there. Phone is there. Bit confused, but thinks she's gone to get a bit of headspace.
Yeah. And so they get going. His solicitor's there. There's 2 guards in the room as well. One is taking notes. So they explain to him, you just go slowly because we're going to have to write notes down. The jury are also told by the judge, to be aware that, there'll be gaps in the interview because the guard is basically writing down what's being said. So he's there, he's sitting in he's just sitting in a chair, no desk in front of him. His arms are folded. He's wearing kind of a dark blue polo t-shirt, collared t-shirt, had grey pants. He's wearing his glasses that you've seen all the time. He's wearing them in court today. He's wearing them in every picture that you've seen of him. And he they go through and again ask him to start from the beginning, and they're starting off on the 19th of March. They asked him, what do you want to tell me about the offence? And he replied, the alleged offence. And he said, well, the offence for which you're here. And he kind of said, look, everything's already been documented. Just ask questions. In other words, I'll answer them. So he goes through what they did on the 19th of March, going to the car boot sale and the rest of it, getting the Apache pizza, later that night, and going to bed, and then going to Dungarvan the next day for Aldi. And when he comes back and she's gone, and going around then trying to contact family, eventually going to the guards in Fermoy, going to Killarney, looking at places, and, went to a couple of car boot sales, expecting to see her. And he kind of says, really, the rest is history. So the guard then, he says, okay, he goes back to the 19th again, and he says, well, what time did you actually leave, the community field where the car boot sale was on? And or what time, he goes back to actually that very morning. What time did you leave? And it goes through when you were leaving then, did you turn left or right? And, what exit did you take off the motorway? And it's this kind of level of detail again they're going through.
And how is his demeanour during that?
Well, it doesn't change. He has his arms folded. He's kind of headed slightly to one side a bit, but he's chatting. He's just speaking, in his kind of Lancashire accent. He's asked. He regularly says, "Oh, well, we always get up at this time, and we always go here. We always do it this way, and we always, And the judge says, "Well, specifically on this day, what did you do?" And a couple of times he asked him you're referring to this particular day. And then he kind of says the only strange thing he says that happened that day was that, as he found out later, he didn't know this on the day, that one of the people that they knew from the car boot sales, who we haven't heard from at any stage, that he tells Richard Satchwell that she had gone to him that day and said that she loved Richard and that she would never do anything to hurt him. And he didn't hear about that for a week later, he says. And he says the other thing was that she didn't buy as much as normal. And we heard yesterday that she bought the makeup set and the fold-away that he said, and the fold-away travel iron. And he just explained we didn't go out partying or drinking. That was our thing. It was always sociable and you chat to people. And, there again, the cards are saying, at this stage he has a different car, and he's just asked to describe it. And he says, it's a Nissan Primera silver 4-door, and he's asked to describe it further. And he replies, Jesus, really? So that's how this is the beginning, of him retelling this story that he has stuck to, the narrative that he has remained faithful to so far.
What date did the police find the remains after the 10th of October?
So he was arrested on the 10th of October and he's in custody. And the next day, on the 11th of October, decomposed human remains were found at the house. They were wrapped in black plastic sheeting in this 3-foot grave dug underneath the stairs in the sitting room, which had been cemented over. And these were later ID'd as Tina Satchwell.
So presumably you're going to, in the next day or two of evidence, get the details of that search, the end of his current arrest, which the jury are watching the video of at the moment, and it'll then presumably move on to what happens next, which is the discovery of those remains.
Yeah, we know from the opening statement that as a result of this discovery, they get a rearrest warrant, and he's arrested then on 2 p.m. on the 12th of October. And he's again taken to Cove. He's interviewed, and in that one, he finally changes his narrative.
Which is now the state's case. Okay, Eamon, thank you very much.
Always a pleasure, Nicola.
I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.